good number. We've got quite a few people booked on, so we'll get started. So welcome everybody, thank you for coming along to Feed Your Mind today. Just a quick bit of housekeeping to begin with. So you've all joined with your mics turned off, and we're just asking that you keep them turned off throughout the event just to minimise the background noise. You can have your video set to on or off, it's up to you. Just so you know, we are going to be recording the Zoom event today, so we'll just be using this for our archive, and it'll go onto our website after the event as well. We are using the chat function down at the bottom of your screen. So if you've got a question to ask during the event, the format is going to be that I'm going to do a quick introduction. Charlie's going to say a few words to introduce the seed saving demonstration. Then we're going to sort of go to Horton Community Farm, see the demonstration and have a look around there. And then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end just to run through questions. So feel free to be adding your questions to the chat throughout the event, and we'll all come back and discuss together at the end. So just to begin giving you a bit of background, so Feed Your Mind is a programme of talks that we run at the gallery that's funded by the Paul Mellon Centre for Studies in British Art. These are usually quite informal lunchtime talks and discussions that we host, and they're always inspired by the theme of the exhibition that we're showing at the moment. So we invite a guest speaker to come and share sort of their knowledge and expertise around the subject. This is the first time we've done one of these online, so please be patient with us. And in some ways it's really good because we've managed to open the event up to lots more people. People can join from wherever they are at home. But one limitation that's a bit of a shame is that we're not actually sat within the gallery and within the exhibition today. So I'm just going to start by giving a bit of an introduction to Seedscapes, our current show, and then we'll hand over to Charlie, who's our guest speaker, who's going to give a bit more of an insight into the importance and the process of seed saving. So I'm going to share my screen just to give people a bit of, hang on a sec, just so that, so I'm going to share my screen and share some images of Seedscapes in the gallery. There we go, that should be on. So this is going to just be a few images from the exhibition. Just so you know, if you haven't seen the exhibition and if you can't get down to the gallery, we have got a fantastic virtual tour as well, which you can view on our website. We'll put a little link into the chat for that at the end so that you can take a look afterwards. But just in short, so Seedscapes Future-Proofing Nature is our latest exhibition. It features 5 international artists, all exploring global efforts to safeguard vital plant species from extinction. So the exhibition features 5 artists. So we've got Dawn Doherty and St. Calcer, who are both based in the US. We've got French artist Christelle Labat, Heidi Morstang, who's Norwegian, and British-based artist Liz Orton. And the exhibition features photography, film, even a series of photographic sculptures. So some work in the exhibition kind of has a real focus on change in biodiversity and the landscape. So the work that we see here, this kind of colourful images here, are by Christelle Labat. And these sculptures that we see in the background of it, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse actually, I'm pointing at them. Then these are by St. Calcer, and both Christelle and Sant are looking at kind of changes in landscape over time and sort of the sustainability of different plant species. Moving on a little bit to some of the bodies of work that are a little bit more relevant to today's talk. So this that you can see here is a video by Heidi Morstang. And Heidi has made work with the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. And this is a huge seed storage facility that's built into the Arctic permafrost. And it's home to a third of the world's food crop seeds. And it's kind of this sort of high security seed storage space. And it's kind of known as like the world's final backup. So this is where the seeds are kept that would be used to essentially replant the world should disaster, war, famine occur. This is a still from Heidi's film. Just to move on swiftly through. So this is work by Dornith Doherty. We've got sort of two bits of work by Dornith. These large images that you can see along the back wall here, and the vitrines here in front. So Dornith's project is called Archiving Eden. And for this work, she's travelled to some of the most important seed vaults across the world. So from kind of antique wood-panelled herbariums in St. Petersburg in Russia to very high-tech biogenic slabs where seeds are stored in Brasilia. She's photographed the spaces where the seeds are stored. And then she's made these very beautiful images using X-ray equipment of the seeds that are in storage as well. And this photograph, sorry, it really doesn't do the exhibition justice at all. They are beautiful, beautiful photographs. Finally, just to mention the work of Liz Orton. So Liz has worked with Kew Herbarium here in the UK. And these images show bundles of seeds that have been donated to Kew, and they are kind of awaiting categorization. So they're sort of in a dormant state, and they're quite simply packaged in the newspaper or in the bundles that they've been sent to the herbarium in. And I think this kind of quite sort of basic almost method of seed storing is a really nice image, and it's quite a nice sort of point there to move on to today's event. So I'm just gonna stop sharing. Right, so I think now it's a good chance to move on to introduce Charlie. So inspired by the exhibition, which hopefully that quick introduction has given you all a sense of the artwork in the show. So Charlie, with the exhibition, we're looking at kind of environmental efforts very much on a global scale. But what we're also keen to do is take a look at the impact that local efforts can have on environmental sustainability. So this is why we wanted to invite Charlie Gray to do a talk for us today. So Charlie is the co-founder of Horton Community Farm, which is a volunteer-led food growing initiative in Bradford city centre. Charlie is an expert on seeds. She's also the Northern Regional Coordinator for the Seed Sovereignty Programme for the Gaia Foundation as well. So I'll let you introduce yourself properly, Charlie, and hand over to you now. So just to say to people, if you haven't figured this out already, it's good to have the settings on speaker view rather than gallery view. So then when Charlie takes over now, she should appear big on your screen. So just a quick reminder, I'll hand over to Charlie, then we're going to show a film from Horton Community Farm, and then we'll be back here at the end for questions. So over to you, Charlie.
Thank you, Angela. I think I'll keep gallery view and then I can see all of you. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and some names that I know online, who I may not have met, but I know you online. And welcome to everybody. Yeah, I was really grateful to be invited. I love Impressions Gallery, and the work that I've seen there has always been fantastic. And I did see that Seedscapes, and I was very excited to be able to join in this way. I always find the term excuse me, expert is a little bit daunting. I'm not sure I really want to claim that, but nevertheless, I was lucky enough to study at Kew. I have been in the herbarium there, and if I had followed the more traditional path that ethnobotanists follow, then I might have been going around, you know, to remote communities somewhere and collecting seeds or collecting herbarium voucher specimens. So it is something I'm passionate about, and I have to say that image on the front is really beautiful. I find it yeah, a very alluring image, the mixture of newspaper with seeds. And I suppose what I want to talk about today is very much a grassroots perspective, and the idea that this is a path that anyone can take. As soon as you're a food grower, then you start to have things that go to seed, and I came into seed saving I think like most people do, because things started to go to seed, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I could save that for next year. And so I've been growing at Horton Community Farm for about, well, eight years, I suppose. We were setting it up initially. It's in Great Horton on Cecil Avenue, if anyone is local. You can see our website as well for more information. And it's, I guess it's a hobby, really. It's a thing that starts as a hobby, and then I was lucky enough, because I've been involved in organising. So the project is a community project, and because of the organising that I've done, it's really a networking role. So yeah, so I am now the coordinator for the Gaia Seed Sovereignty Programme, which is really supporting farmers and growers to produce seed. Because we actually only produce 20% of organic open pollinated seed here in the UK, and the rest of it we import. That's for I think that figure's for veg, but possibly it's broader than that. But certainly most growers, and certainly most northern growers, probably don't get all their seed from even a regional supplier. So yeah, so excuse me, my role is to encourage as much seed saving as possible, and yeah, like I say, we have been seed saving at Horton Community Farm. So the things that I didn't talk about in the video are really, why do people save seeds? And hopefully I imagine there are some seed savers amongst the group. In fact, I know there are, and maybe some others who are wanting to start out on this journey. So gardeners' varieties have been massively reduced in the last 150 years. Prior to that, probably most people just shared and swapped seeds, and seed companies have kind of risen and also then disappeared with the big agricultural companies that have tried to buy up all the regional and local seed producers. So gardeners' varieties are often things that people share between each other, or there are specialist seed producers that produce open pollinated seed, or even things like the Heritage Seed Library, which runs out of Garden Organic. You can join as a member, and then you get sent some heritage seeds to grow. I'm sure amongst you the reasons for saving seed you know, may be quite varied. Sometimes we try to grow things that perhaps cost a lot to buy ordinarily, or perhaps are just not available in the supermarket, or even from a market, or from a local producer. If we look at the seeds that are used in allotments or local growers, we tend to get all the different colours and the sizes and shapes, different varieties, which we just don't get otherwise. Seeds that we save and share are locally adapted, so they're much more likely to be able to adapt to changes in climate with temperature, or changes in our soils. And also even farmers' seeds tend to be seeds that will all come mature at the same time. So they'll all fruit at the same time, which makes it easier for farmers using mechanised systems to harvest, but that's not what somebody growing for themselves or for a smaller scale necessarily wants. Also, there's the cost over time. If you are able to save your own seed, it can add up over time. And some of these heritage varieties, I mean, they've been passed down generation to generation. So part of my work is to really share the gratitude for people who have been saving and developing different varieties of seeds, who've kept this alive. So whilst I find the exhibition really interesting, and as Angela said, the photographs are really beautiful, the idea that we can keep life going by putting it in a freezer is, you know, it's an interesting idea, but it's hopefully one that we don't have to resort to. And really keeping seeds in the hands of growers, gardeners, allotmenteers is really key, and sharing them as much as we can so that we get more diversity in the genetic, in the gene pool of each of these varieties. So I probably shouldn't talk too long, is that enough? Yeah. Yeah, so the film really is more about the actual seeds and some simple seeds that we can save, but if you have other experience or questions, we can talk about that after.
Brilliant, thank you, Charlie. So now I think Jen is just queuing up the film. So we're going to go over to Horton Community Farm, and here's something we filmed earlier.
Hello and welcome to Horton Community Farm here in Bradford city centre. I'm Charlie Gray, I'm a member of the co-op here, and as you can see, this wonderful site is an urban oasis, that's how some people describe it, and I'm here near the entrance on Cecil Avenue. We're on Cecil Avenue Allotments and we are a land permaculture centre, and we call ourselves a land permaculture centre for food growing and community resilience. So we do a number of things. We offer education, so outdoor education in forest schools. We offer a space for wildlife, as you can see. We offer therapeutic activities, and for that we have a purpose-built therapy garden with the small polytunnel over there, which has deep raised beds. And we do food growing, so we have a couple of polytunnel frames and hope to recover them at some point, and we grow veg in polycultures with flowers for companion plants, and we have a forest garden which is down the end here. So yeah, so like I said, we offer education, spaces for wildlife and wildlife friendly gardening, therapy, volunteering. We have normally have twice weekly volunteer sessions, and at the moment it is through application. People can apply to be volunteers. We still have a couple of spaces on a Friday available, and last but not least, like I said, food growing. So I'm going to give you a little tour of the space so you can see those different areas, and we'll be focusing on seed and saving seed today. So I thought I'd show you some wildflower seeds. These were collected from actually from some of the beds, but this is a vetch, so it's a very typical wildflower. You can see the little pods, they are actually very like little peas, and they're very good for fixing nitrogen in the soil. So I collected some of these so that we can sow them again next year. So one thing I didn't say is that we started the project about 12 years ago. It was part of Transition Bradford, and people volunteered here. Lots of students from the university and local residents, environmental minded folk got together and started clearing it, because most of the site was very overgrown like this. So let's take a walk down to the forest garden and we can see a bit more of the site. We have got hedgehogs here, which is very exciting, and there is a fox's den, and we do see foxes, lots of birds, and I think we've probably seen an increase in butterflies, because we do grow with lots of wildflowers and we leave edges with brambles and stinging nettles, which are actually a really good habitat for moths and butterflies. And you can see the blackberries here. And there's usually something to forage. Oh, that's one of the butterflies that likes the brambles. So this area here is the forest garden. So you can see here there's trees and then the odd fruit bush, but here we're actually planting up underneath. And so the idea of a forest garden is you've got many layers with lots of herbs and then even some perennial root vegetables. Yeah, and the idea is it's perennial, so it'll come back year after year and hopefully be low maintenance. That's the idea. So this is what we call our wildlife corridor, to use an ecological term. But basically the whole site is a really good habitat for wildlife, but the birds and bees particularly love this bit. There's some I think pelargoniums there, and then there's usually comfrey and lots of things that bees like in here. Yeah, the comfreys, there's some comfrey there, it's dying back now, but so yeah, so we deliberately leave lots of areas for wildlife, as well as sometimes sow wildflower seeds. We're just coming up to what was our polytunnel, but it's still a veg growing area. We tend to grow our veg with flowers as well, so in what you call a polyculture. So as you can see, there's quite a lot of flowers on the right, the yellow flowers, so that's actually a plant just going to seed, but the bees really like that, so at the moment we're not taking it out yet. So I'll show you some of the seeds that we've collected from the site. These are all flowers, so that was the vetch that I showed earlier. So that's calendula, that's a French marigold. So they're both called marigold, but that's pot marigold and that's French marigold. These probably could do with some cleaning. I think they might have got a little bit of mould, so that's something you do have to be careful with seeds. I think the seeds inside are probably okay. So those are corn cockles, and these are wallflowers, and on the end here we've got some knapweed. The seeds are actually these tiny little things in here, the little brush looking things, I think. Oops. And then these are some of the vegetable seeds that I had to hand. So we've got chard and beans and peas and onions. So what I'm going to talk through is some of the things to think about with seed saving. So I'm going to start with the easiest things to save. So let's go and have a look at the peas over here. Sorry, the beans and the peas. Oh, I did already put some there. Okay, so these are French beans. So similar to peas, they're very, very easy to save. So I'm just going to talk through some of the things you have to think about and what makes something easy to save or not. So these are seeds that you can grow as if you're growing them to eat. In fact, you can grow some to eat and then you just leave the last ones to go to seed. And you can see here how the pod is now starting to bulge, and you can see the shape of the seed. I'm just going to have a little look and see if I can find one which is a bit more advanced. So they're all fairly similar. That one looks, let's see if I can find a drier one. So what you're really looking for, unfortunately, these were planted a little bit late, so I can't show you them when they're fully dry. However, I can show you, these are a little bit small, the seeds. But what you're looking for is something that's really bulging and actually starting to go dry. Ideally you want them actually dry, and if you can rattle them and the beans inside actually move around, that's when you know that they're starting to dry, and you just leave them to get them till they get properly dry on the plant. Okay, so none of these are quite ready, but this one might have some beans that are actually the right size. Yeah, they're still a little bit small, but those could be saved. I mean, you can pick them like this, but they'll just lose a lot of moisture, whereas if you leave them to dry in the pod, they just get to really finish off properly. So the things to consider are, is a plant an annual or a biennial? So we talked about perennial with the forest garden, that means it comes back year after year. If something's an annual, like a bean or a pea, it means it grows and it produces the seed that year. If it's biennial, it means it produces the seed the next year. So that's things like onions, beetroot. So far I've only saved seed from annuals here. So one of the things to consider is whether a plant is what we call self-fertile, and whether it self-pollinates or it's cross-pollinated. So this is a French bean, and that's important because runner beans are different. But the flower is pollinated by itself, it's self-fertile before it opens, and then it will produce the bean. So I'm going to show an example of another plant, the cucurbits, pumpkin, courgette, cucumbers. That family are what we call cross-pollinated. So the pollen from the male flower has to go on the pollen of the female flower, or it has to be received on the stigma of the female flower, and then it's transported into the ovary, and that's how you get your courgette. So I can show you that. There's two different flowers. So here you can see the courgettes, so that's growing nicely. That one has a flower that's more or less dropped off. That one's still got a flower, as has that one. And this one here is the male flower. So it's just got the stem rather than a courgette. You can see a very, very mini courgette there that's growing on the female flower. That's the female flower that's closed up now. And then the courgette's growing. But for it to produce a courgette, the pollen from the male flower has to get onto the stigma in the female flower. And so if you want to save a courgette, because they are, so these are called outbreeders. So the peas and other things are called inbreeders, but an outbreeder needs to, if you want to save the seed, you have to choose the flower and hand pollinate it yourself. So this is a bit more complicated. So that's why I'm not going to focus on it today, but it's worth knowing that, because if you try and save your seed, you will find you'll probably get something quite unusual, and that's why we have so many unusual types of squash as well. Okay, so we can have a quick look at this whilst we're here. So this is a good example of another thing that we need to think about when we're wanting to save seeds. So here we've got some lettuce, and then behind the lettuce we've got Mizuna, this one here with the jagged leaves, and we've got some purple frilly mustard. And the Mizuna and the purple frilly mustard are both going to flower and therefore to seed. So these are actually the seed pods, and because they are in the brassica family, in the cabbage family, they do the same thing. They need pollen from elsewhere, and so they will very easily cross. So again, it's not one of the easiest things to save. And the other thing I wanted to illustrate is that you have to think about space. So this is quite a small plant, a low plant, but when it produces seed, the seeds come right up here and they bush out. So one of the things you need to think about when saving seed is how much space it's going to take. Okay, another thing to think about, and we'll go and see a couple more plants up here. Yeah, I can show that quite easily. We're going to look at lettuce, which is easy to save, but it is somewhat fiddly. So similar to the Mizuna, the plants we were looking at back there, it gets a lot bigger. So you can see the lettuce was over there, and all of this has come out of one plant or maybe a couple of plants. And so all of these are the flowers, and it's starting to go to seed. They're not dry yet, but I will show an example of seed. There's another plant I know that's a bit further on, but the point is these tiny little flower heads have the seed inside, so you just leave it to go dry. And lettuces don't cross very easily, so these are one of the easier things to save. There's only two things to consider with lettuce: is it you have to leave it for quite a long time for all of these flowers to form and then to go dry so that you can collect the seed, and the other thing to consider is that they're very tiny, so a bit fiddly. I will show you some dry seed I've got over there before we go and look at harvesting. Some things that are easy to harvest. So should we just grab the lettuce seed? I think I put it down. Yes, here it is. So most of these are relatively easy. Well, that's why we started with these things, because they are generally easy. But once you start looking at things like lettuce or things like carrot, they're more difficult, partly because of the size of the seed. So can you see in there, there's some lettuce seeds? I'll just see if I can get any out whilst I'm on camera. It's a bit fiddly. And actually you might find that there's a lot of dry stuff but not much seed. That's one seed in there. So there's a lot of dry material. There's a few more in there. Whether they're viable or not, I don't know. So that's another thing to think about, is that sometimes you might save seed, but you don't know if it's actually going to work. So because these are so tiny, it's, you know, they may work, but they looked a little bit flimsy to me. I don't know if that's just because I've not actually grown from my own lettuce seed before. But yeah, so some of the bigger ones, what you see is that they also dry out and some can get a bit wrinkly. So in previous years we've saved bean seeds before and they've been really nice and shiny. So I'm just noticing that these are a bit more wrinkly than, you know, I've previously noticed. So whether that is going to affect them, I can't be sure. But yeah, that is something you can do, is you can practice trying to germinate seeds, so laying them on tissue paper and just seeing if they germinate. And if you're concerned, you know, you can always sow them a bit more thickly, but it's worth trying them first. Okay, so we'll just have a look at a couple of things that are really easy to harvest. I'll take my calendula. Right. So somewhere here I did, here's some lettuce seed. Yeah, here. There are some that are dry, so I'm going to come back and harvest some more of these. And we can just have another look, see if we can see any more. but that's one of the things with, these look a bit better, or at least more abundant, we'll see. There we are. So this, I probably shouldn't just throw them on there, although hopefully we will grow. So this year what I did was a kind of what I like to call a forage bed. So a bed where we had lots of different salads, we had some chard and broad beans and lots of calendula. There were some cornflowers, so different wild flowers amongst the vegetables. It's a little bit bare now, but I'm leaving this to collect seed from. So this is a chard here, and as you can see, this one with the red is getting a bit taller, and then this one with the yellow is really tall, and you can see the flower heads. So these are actually the flowers, and they have tiny little flowers, and they also cross. So I did sow some beetroot along here, so that was probably a bit of a mistake, because it means that I can't save all this chard because it may have crossed, because it's one of the plants that crosses very easily, and with beetroot you have to wait till the second year because it's a biennial. With the chard I don't believe that's the case, but I probably should check that. These are broad beans, and so they're slightly different to the runner beans, because these do cross with other plants, other broad runner beans. So we may save the seeds because we don't have any other runner beans growing. We've got a few winter crops coming, some radishes, hopefully some chard. There's a couple more things that we have saved before. The tomatoes are really behind this year, so unfortunately I don't think we'll even have a crop. But the marigolds have done really well again. This is a Tagetes, so it's a French marigold, and again the seeds are really easy to save. They form inside here. Once the head's dried off, you just break it apart and you can see the seeds. So I can talk a little bit more about the isolation practices. So if you do want to save brassicas, for example, you can either grow one crop, so you might grow just broccoli or just cabbage or radish, whatever it is you want to grow for seed, and then you can be sure that you'll get that variety that you wanted. But if you wanted to grow different things on a larger scale, people use nets and things. They use isolation cages, so a bit like your cages for fruit to stop birds, you stop the insects getting in, and then professionals would then introduce their own insects into the cages to do the pollination. Yeah, so up here we wanted to look at the calendula. So this is one of the flowers we use a lot across the site because it's very useful, very beautiful. It's a great pollinator attractor, and it has some antifungal properties. You can kind of feel it around here. It feels a little bit sticky. It's got a slightly resinous product. And the seeds are very easy to collect. When you see a bunch of seeds that are dry like that, you can see the flower heads forming, the seed heads forming. But once they're dry, they're really easy to collect, and that's why we have loads of it. So we just collect that because it's a really useful plant. So yeah, so some of the wildflowers are really easy to gather. And should we just have a look at one of the corn? Little treat. I haven't actually dared to look at them yet because I was hoping to have a really good example, and I didn't bring a knife today, but let's have a look at this. I'm hoping it's ready, we shall see. But corn is one of the really interesting ones because It is what we call an outbreeder. It does cross-fertilise and it's wind pollinated, and it has male and female flowers on the same plant. So you can see here, these are the male flowers, and the female has grown these. That's where the cobs have grown. And so if you have a block, this is a reason that you grow corn in a block, because it's the wind that pollinates, so the wind has to be able to get the pollen from the male to the female flowers. So in the centre of a very large block you might find that they don't cross-pollinate, but on the edges they might well do. So that's why GM corn is such a big problem, because it will go and cross-pollinate your lovely organic crop. And unfortunately you're likely to get sued for doing that, even if it wasn't your fault. A bit of seed politics there for you. Oh, it's not, I would say these aren't entirely ready, so that's a little bit sad, but again, we planted quite a lot of stuff late. But basically, if you're growing corn to save the seed, these are the seeds. So then you've got lots to plant next year if you decide not to eat one of the cobs. I'm going to leave the rest, and hopefully we'll at least get a few cobs that will be actually ripe. And one nice fact for you is that this stuff is called corn silk, and it's medicinal. I can't remember what for, but it's used in Mexico and other places. We could also have a little look at some of these. I think they're very small. So yeah, the thing that we are struggling with is a lot of stuff was planted. Oh, there's a big one. Right, so this is a nice example. We grew these plants. These are tomatillos. There's about 6 of them, and they are grown from seed from one tomatillo last year. So exactly like this. Very easy to save, and we haven't grown any other tomatillos, so it shouldn't have crossed. And to be honest, tomatoes and tomatillos also don't generally cross. So I should have brought a knife, but you will see the seeds inside. So this is a good example of what we call wet seed. So inside a tomato, a cucumber, a courgette, the seeds are in a moist environment. So the method for saving seeds from a fruit like this is you squeeze the seed out, and you try to get as much flesh, this stuff, off as you can, and just put the seeds into a jar of water and leave them for a few days to get all the pulp off. I think, to be honest, with the tomatillos I didn't do that. I think I just dried the seed because they don't have so much of the mucilaginous stuff around them like tomatoes do. But with tomatoes you have to put it in water, and well, you don't have to, but one method is to put it in water and allow the liquid to sit for a few days in the jar with the seeds, and it actually smells pretty horrible. But by the end of a few days, all of that gloop around the seed will then come off, and you can take the seeds. Sometimes it's useful to have a sieve, and you kind of rub it on the sieve, and then you take the seeds and dry them out, and that's how to save tomato seeds, or in this case tomatillos. Yeah, so they don't cross very much, and they don't take that much extra space, because once a tomato's ready for eating, it only needs a few extra weeks, I would say, or if that. It just needs to be a really nice ripe tomato. I mean, a few things I probably should say is, obviously if you're saving seed, you always want to try and save the best seed, so the best plants, the plants that have done really well. You want to try and follow the processes of drying and labelling, so you don't mix up your seeds, things like that. So yeah, so I've only sort of briefly covered some of the plant biology, just to help people that might be wanting to save different things. But one of the books I would recommend is, I think it's Back Garden Seed Saving. I forget the actual title, but it's Sue Stickland, and it's an excellent book. And it's got a really useful table at the back of the book that gives number ratings 1 to 4 or 5 of how easy or difficult different things are to save in relation to those categories that I talked about earlier. So whether they're annual, biennial, how much space they need, if you need to isolate them from other crops of the same family, and how easy they are to harvest. So hopefully it's useful, and hopefully more people will be saving seed. There's lots of other resources out there, so yeah, keep saving those seeds.
You're still here, that's great. It's quite weird watching myself. Am I talking now? Sorry, I can't see Angela. Yeah?
Yes, you're there.
Okay. Yeah, here's the book. I thought it might be useful to people if I showed the book. So it is Back Garden Seed Saving, Keeping Our Vegetable Heritage Alive. So it's focused on vegetable seed saving, by Sue Stickland. And the table that I mentioned is near the back, and it goes through the crops and numbers them 1 to 4 in terms of how sort of challenging they are to save. So I highly recommend this book. And yeah, I suppose just any questions. I have got a picture of beans that are closer to, you know, being how you would like them for saving, you know, really dry on the plant. And I think with things like courgette or squash, you know, you really have to save them quite a lot longer than you know you would do for picking for eating. So there's kind of details, there's a lot of details, but yeah, if you've got any specific questions, feel free to ask. Are we doing it from the, if people are happy to speak, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So either Jen as the host, if you could unmute people, or if people can unmute yourself, that would be great. So David, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, David.
Like your tomatoes, mine are not going to ripen this year. Obviously, they've been grown outside. But is it possible to save seeds from unripe tomatoes, green tomatoes that are nearly there?
That's a good question. I would say sort of going with the principle of saving your best seed. I probably wouldn't, only because those seeds are then in a tomato that's still green, or, you know, still the colour you weren't expecting it. You were expecting it to get, you know, other features. Yeah. I'm not sure. I have to say I don't know much about the biology of at what point, because the seeds are connected and then they're in a pod or they're in the flesh of the tomatoes. But I'm not sure at what point, you know, that process is really finished. So when I'm called an expert, I'd like to say there are obviously boundaries to that. I don't really know.
I'm going to give it a try, you know.
I mean, feel free to
take out the crop apart from chutney.
Yeah, so just one caveat for that is that the tomatoes that we grew this year were from saved seed from last year. So they were planted late and they were harvested late. It was a really nice ripe red tomato I got the seeds from, but maybe it just, you know, it came originally from Mallorca. I've saved it for 2 years on site, but maybe it is struggling a bit, you know, with adapting. I don't know for sure whether it's because I planted it too late, it didn't get enough sunlight, or, you know, so there are, you know, you'll always have questions. Sometimes when you get it exactly right, like I said, some of the beans we saved earlier were so plump and shiny. I can't show you them because I've since grown them, but you know, one year to the next, it will vary. So I think my biggest message, if you like, is just to keep doing it. And, you know, that's how we keep the genetics, diversity, and you know, the beauty of these different varieties, how we keep it alive is just to keep doing it. So yeah, maybe try some.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll give it a try. Thank you, Charlie.
Can I just say two things? One for David with the tomatoes. Mine, most of mine haven't ripened, but I've been putting them in paper bags on top of my boiler with one ripe one in the bag, and then they've been ripening up. So whether they're still okay to save or not, I don't know, but I'll try. Yeah, but just about saving seeds, I'm part of Veg on the Edge in Saltaire, and every year so far, but I just can't guarantee it's going to happen next year, when it's the potato day from West Yorkshire Organics, we always have a seed swap stall. So if we save some of ours, that's the place to come and try something that you haven't got. You don't have to pay anything. Just bring any seeds if you save too many. But I'll try and let Angela or whoever, or you know if it's going ahead. Obviously, we don't know yet whether things like that can go ahead. It's usually in early February.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions?
Can I ask another one then? Oh,
yes.
Go for it.
Oh, so,
I'm not sure where. Oh, I think David, are you still there?
yeah, actually, there's somebody else trying to talk. That's why I've had a question. You know,
I think something went unusual with the sound, but you're good to go now.
Yeah. I'll ask mine anyway, shall I? So it's very brief, and that's the corn one. I have some corn on cobs grown, and I wondered if you dried them out. You know, the moist, aren't they, on the when you pick them, the soft. I wondered if you dried them out as, you know, like bean seeds or something, you know, or let them mature on the plant.
Well, so in the UK, I mean, depending on where you are, obviously corn sort of takes up a good long growing season. So quite often, you know, it's quite can be fairly late. So this time of year, that I think, sorry, I'm getting distracted by my own thoughts. Charles Dowding, I think, says, you know, you harvest before Halloween, you know, before the end of October. You kind of want to get everything in, and I think that's probably, depending on the seeds, fairly true of seed as well. So the reason our seeds are not dry is because I planted them a bit late, but I'm not sure they're going to be dry on the plant by the end of October. Occasionally I harvest things in November, but you know, tomatillos maybe, because they're wet anyway. Tomatoes, tomatillos, anything that's you know, a wet seed, you can leave maybe a bit longer. But what I found is these are field beans, you know, they need to be incredibly dry. Yeah. You can hear the crunchiness on the plant. Ideally you want them to start rattling if they're peas and beans before you harvest them, but obviously if it's raining for days and days on end, they'll just get wet again and sort of stay. If it doesn't dry in between, it's okay if it rains, has a shower, and then it dries off. And these, it's amazing that plants do this, that, you know, somehow seeds still dry even in this climate, but you do have to get your timing a little bit right with that kind of thing. I have seen some broad beans, you know, get a little bit, you know, they can get too damp. But they're often harvested a bit earlier. So yeah, just keep an eye on things. Obviously lettuce you definitely want dry, so you might pick it and then dry it. You dry it more inside anyway, I think. Anne, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you very much, Charlie. This is one of the best lunch times ever. Photography, veg growing, and even a mention for Potato Day. I'm in my element. Anyway, I have a question. How do you know when is the best time to plant the seeds that you've saved?
Okay, yeah. Well, we're in Yorkshire mostly, some in Lancashire, maybe elsewhere as well. So I think Cyan may be even further afield. But yes, obviously we don't want to be following the plantings for Devon. Our climate isn't like Devon. It's not like London. Oh, and from Devon, hello. So yeah, so we tend to be a few weeks, if not a month, behind some places like Devon. So what you see on a seed packet from Devon is not necessarily applicable to Yorkshire. Thank you for that question, Anne. Charles Dowding is an excellent no-dig gardener, and Steph Hafferty, you know, they're excellent to follow for generally patterns of planting. But what I found this year was I really struggled with quite a lot of the plants, peas and cucurbits in particular, because I planted them out and then I covered them with some fleece, but even so it was just the last frost was mid-May. So when he talks about, or when they talk about their last frost, ours is often a week or two later. So yeah, so use your own judgment. If you can tell the weather's still below 5 degrees or there's a frost, then it's still too early for a lot of the tender crops. For things like broad beans, you can plant some now. Your garlic, and you might just get a last sowing of chard in, you know, some of the hardier brassicas. Yeah.
Thanks.
We've just got one last quick question in the chat there from Nina Jones, asking if the two calendulas cross.
Oh, so no, the pot marigold and the tagetes? No, as far as I know. Yeah, they're quite different. I wanted to show the seeds actually, because I showed them at the beginning, but the French marigolds, the really colourful ones that we were growing with tomatoes, these are the seeds. So they're kind of like the little brush type seeds. So once the flower's dried, you just crumble these out. But no, they wouldn't cross. And I think a lot of those kind of flowers don't cross too much. Katie's mentioned that sowing in succession can be really useful. Yeah, so sowing in succession and also having more ready. That I sowed my peas 6 times this year. Some of them from saved seed, maybe it was the seed, some of them got frost nobbled, I think some got slug nobbled, and we still didn't have a good crop of peas. So, you know, you win some, you lose some, but definitely having variety and different sowings is really key.
Can I ask your advice, Laurie? Do you think this looks good or not really?
Pippa's asked me which is my favourite artwork. I have to say the large images.
I just don't think it looks good.
Like kind of like luminous yellow dots. I absolutely love that.
Like,
I think it was the woman beginning with D. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did also love the cover image because one of my favourite things in my studies was producing herbarium voucher specimens. So I love the artistic layout. So I've actually got a pile of cardboard with newspaper with plants in between just for my own pleasure. Occasionally I make them, so I like that image. But yeah, thanks.
That's brilliant. Well, that takes us to 1:30. That's gone so quickly. So I just want to say thank you, Charlie, for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been a really nice event, and it's been really nice for us. It was really great going out and actually doing the filming with you as well. So yeah, like I said, pros and cons to doing this online. It's allowed us to kind of get out and do something a bit different. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed the event. So yeah, just thank you to Charlie, thank you to Paul Mellon Centre who funds the talks, thank you to our regular funders as well, Arts Council England and Bradford Council. just so everyone knows, Seedscapes is continuing it at Impressions until the 12th of December, so you've got plenty of time to come and see it. And then next year, if you're not local to Bradford, the exhibition's going to be going on tour to the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and Art Gallery in Exeter from February to May, and then to the Dick Institute in Kilmarnock in Scotland from September to December next year. So plenty of opportunity to see the exhibition beyond it showing at Impressions. So, sorry, did you?
I was just going to say, I've saved a West Yorkshire Seed Savers Facebook page that I've just set up. So if anyone wants to join.
Oh, yes, a few things coming through in the chat there and links and things as well. That's brilliant. Thank you everyone very much for joining us and for questions and being part of the event. We've got lots more coming up as part of Seedscapes. We've got a photo book fair next week. We've got a symposium featuring the artists in the exhibition. So have a look on our website as well at everything else we've got coming up if you're interested in this exhibition. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.